When it came to making a frittata, I found inspiration in an odd place, specifically Detroit-style pizza. And to me, that one little bit of inspiration makes a frittata way more satisfying. But before we jump into making the frittata that I've no joke eaten almost every day this month, we first need to prep the vegetables that are going to go into it. I want to thank our sponsor today, Brightland, but more on them later. For now, let's just jump right into it. So these are most of the ingredients that are going to go inside the frittata. We've got broccolini, bell pepper, onion, some garlic, a little bacon, and some hot cherry peppers. We're going with a 4-egg frittata. It's designed to be more of like a 1-person, 2-person frittata rather than a big 8-egg frittata. So I found that about a 1/3 cup of the onion, the peppers, the broccolini, and I guess the bacon is the right amount of ingredients to fit in the 4 eggs without being too much. And we want to go for like a fairly small dice. I've tried to chop these at a larger dice. They just don't distribute well into the frittata when they're cut that big. So I go a little bit smaller, and I don't need the whole onion, just about that 1/3 cup. I want to do the same thing to the bell pepper. I basically need like 1/4 or 1/3 of a bell pepper. And we just want to cut the cheeks off and then cut those into slices and then into little dices. And for the broccolini, we just want to cut that into little dices that sort of match the size of the onions and the peppers. If the stalks are thick, give them a cut in half. And since broccolini shrinks a lot, we can add 2/3 cup of that because that'll shrink down to about a 1/3 cup once it's cooked. So we got the broccolini, the onions, and the peppers in here. Set that off to the side, and then we can cut our garlic and our hot cherry peppers. And then that's gonna go into a separate bowl. I'm just gonna go with a thin slice on the garlic, and I'm gonna get that into the bowl. And then for the cherry peppers, sometimes the stem is still attached to them. I like to just cut those off because they could be a little tough. And then I just wanna give them a rough dice. And then into the bowl with the garlic. So now we got some garlic, and then those peppers are gonna be some spiciness and acidity. It's almost like the vegetable version of like a Frank's Red Hot. That's just gonna be peppered all the way through the frittata. It's delicious. I've got about 4 strips of bacon. I'm gonna cut those up into thin strips. Again, I like to focus on a smaller slice so that it incorporates better into the frittata, also knowing that the bacon shrinks by half. So now we've got our vegetables prepped. Our bacon's cut. Just want to get these sauteed and get them out of the way so that we can get them into our eggs. Now this recipe is designed for about a 10-inch nonstick skillet. So we're just going to get that onto the heat, about medium-high heat, and we're going to add the bacon directly into that cold pan. And we're going to allow it to slowly render out the fat while the pan heats up. And once the pan starts to get sizzling and you can see the fat start to render out, we want to just lower the heat down to a gentler heat, maybe about medium. And we want to let that fat slowly render out. And eventually enough fat's gonna render out and it's gonna start to bubble and foam up, and that's a good indication that you're close to the bacon being nicely crisp. At this point, I like to tilt the pan so that the oil sort of pools to one side of the pan, and then we can finish the bacon and get that final crisp by sort of confying it in its own fat. And once it's nicely browned, we wanna get it out of the pan immediately and let it carry over to a nice crisp. We just wanna pour that into a bowl, and we wanna catch that bacon in a fine mesh sieve and let that bacon fat settle into the bowl. We're gonna take about a tablespoon of that bacon fat, add it back to the pan, and on about medium-high heat, we're gonna add the rest of the vegetables, and we're gonna saute them until they begin to caramelize. Season it with some salt, and just allow that to cook until you can start to see some color developing on the vegetables. At this point, we can add the hot cherry peppers and the sliced garlic, and once that sliced garlic starts to develop a little bit of browning around the edges, we can kill the heat, and we can transfer those vegetables to a bowl and let those slightly cool down. And I just wanna wipe out that nonstick pan. Sometimes the sugars from the vegetables can latch onto the bottom of the pan, and we want the pan to be nice and clean for the eggs. So I got my sauteed vegetables and my bacon, and we can set those aside. Now before we move forward, I want to talk to you quickly about olive oil. Did you know the olive oil industry has a history of problems? Mislabeling, cutting good oils with bad oils, or bad blends of oils. That's why we got to talk about our sponsor today, Brightland. Brightland is a delicious, high-quality olive oil made of 100% California olives. It contains no additives, no junk, and it's produced with organic methods. It is the good stuff. Many cheaper oils are mixed with low quality, old, or rancid oils to cut costs. Brightland partners with only local California farms that grow high quality olives and press the oil with care. Whether it's for pastas, sauteing, salads, soups, or you can even fry with it with such a high smoke point, Brightland products bring the quality and the flavor that I look for in an olive oil. Just look at this beautiful color of their Alive bottle. It's got nuttiness, it's peppery, it's got a fruity flavor, and it's got this beautiful color. You could could eat it just straight up with some bread, or it'll go perfect in the frittatas that we're making today. And I really love the transparency behind this product. They even put the printed harvest date right on the bottle. So if you want to step up your olive oil game, Brightland's offering my viewers 10% off their first order with the link down in the description. So we'll click the link and let's get back into the recipe. Next, we can prepare our eggs. We're simply gonna go with 4 eggs, about a half cup of milk. And if you're gonna serve this for more people, then you just double, serve 8 eggs. Around the same amount of milk if you want, maybe a little bit more, and maybe a little bit more vegetable. But it's very easy to scale these things up. What I like to do is maybe cut this thing in half, eat it for lunch, and then eat the next half for dinner. So this 1 4-egg frittata satisfies 2 meals for me in a day. So we're just gonna crack 4 eggs into the bowl. Just give it a nice little whisk. You don't have to go too crazy. Pour in our milk. Now once that's mixed up, I've got my cheeses. Plenty of Parmigiano Reggiano, and then I'm using about 1 ounce or 1 slice of provolone. And I'm gonna rip the provolone right into the eggs. But we're going to add the Parmigiano Reggiano about halfway through the cooking process. The idea being to sort of create this like umami crust of Parmesan on top that we broil and set, that adds a little bit more texture to the dish, whereas there's not much texture in a frittata. But if you've ever had like a frico or crispy Parmesan, that's the idea that we're trying to achieve on the top crust of the frittata. So we're gonna save that for a little bit. So once we've got our provolone in, we can go with our vegetables and then most of our bacon. I wanna use some bacon for garnish. And just get that worked in. Now I've got my oven preheating at 425 degrees. We're gonna start on the stove and finish in the oven. And I've got a non-stick pan. And these are high heat non-stick pans from Maiden. So I'm gonna be able to put that into the oven, and then we're gonna quickly add a little bit of broil on top to achieve that Parmesan crust. So if you're worried about that with a non-stick pan, you can use a carbon steel if you have, or like a really well-seasoned cast iron. I forgot to season my eggs, so I'm gonna add a bit of salt to it, but don't go too much because we're gonna add a lot of Parmesan. That's gonna be salty as well. A little bit of black pepper, and then on about medium high heat, we're gonna add a little bit of butter and some of that Brightland olive oil. And once that butter starts bubbling, that's a good sign that it's hot enough to add the eggs. And we're gonna pour in that whole egg mixture, and I'm gonna take a spatula and just make sure that those ingredients are kind of evenly dispersed across the frittata. Then we're just gonna cook it till the edge begins to set and that center is still a little loose. And once that edge sets and there's a little bit of browning we can see developing, I'm gonna pop it into the oven, and we're gonna cook it anywhere from about 5 to 10 minutes in the oven. And when about 95% of the egg is set and there's still a little jiggle in the center, I wanna pull it out of the oven and I wanna turn the broiler on. Then I'm gonna add the cheese. And this is where that Detroit style pizza inspiration comes in. We really just wanna add a generous, even coating across the top of that egg, especially around the edge where the egg meets the pan. And then we wanna pop that under the broiler, and we just wanna let that broil until that cheese crust melts and solidifies. Once the crust is set, get it out of the oven and just give the frittata a second to relax. As the cheese cools, it should solidify and form a nice crust with a little frayed crown. We can get that into a serving tray, and as you can see, we've got that Detroit style pizza cheese crown that we're looking for. It's gonna add a lot of flavor. Cut it just like a pizza, and then on a plate, I like to take a couple slices and stack them. And then I take a little bit of arugula and surround the frittatas, a little bit of that bacon on top, some of the Parmigiano Reggiano, and I finish it again with that really good Brightland olive oil. And the frittata has a nice crisp crust with texture, but the inside of the frittata is still moist. The vegetables have some bite to it, and with the parm and a little bit of that olive oil on top, it really makes for a fantastic breakfast, lunch, or dinner, and one that I eat very often. That Parmesan crust is just an umami bomb that you don't really get in a normal frittata. The arugula, the bacon, and that nice olive oil really makes it a complete dish, and I hope you give it a shot. Recipe's gonna be down in the description. That's all that I have today. I'll see you next time. Until then, take care of yourself and go feed yourself. I think it's time you might want to brush up on some Cacio E Pepe. I just made a new video teaching of various methods on how to create the creamiest Cacio E Pepe that you've ever had. I guarantee it. Give it a shot, and thanks for watching.